Hi, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers. I am Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, June 10th, and we are joined by our all-star panel of local journalists, Josh Molina, podcaster, news hawk, correspondent, and international man of mystery, Ryan P. Cruz, who is at the College World Series, staff writer for The Independent, and Nick Welsh, award-winning Angry Poodle. Thank you all for being here. So the most angst-ridden election in history is now history, I guess. We haven't got the final totals. And everything appeared to go as the bright minds on this panel thought that they would go. Josh, did you have any blinding insight, or what was your big takeaway about the election?
Well, I was out at Susan Salcido's party at the Chase, the Warren Butler owned Chase restaurant. And everyone was sort of not surprised. Everyone sort of felt like it went exactly the way it would go. I think she might have won about 2-1 or something. They're still counting the votes. But Susan Salcido was very ecstatic on election night. She was very pleased. She's never had a challenger before, and this sort of forced her to articulate a campaign, and she won. And I haven't heard from Christy Lozano. She did not give me a comment on election night. Maybe she did other media, I don't know. But I think that the takeaway was that Susan Salcido is the big winner here, and who knows what her political future holds, because I've heard nothing but great favorables from her. People really like her.
Ryan, first of all, you agree with me, do you not, that Susan Salcido was very pleased because her cortisol levels were high? All right.
I like how you snuck that in there.
Well, we'll get back to that. So what was your takeaway?
I think Sheriff Bill Brown breathed a sigh of relief. I think that was kind of what we expected. Juan did pretty well, but I didn't hear from Juan afterwards, and I was a little disappointed in that too. I didn't know, it's his first time in an election, but I think it's always good to have some sort of outward comment afterwards, and he had a good race, and I hope his career keeps going here in Santa Barbara in some capacity. But that was kind of my takeaway from that night.
All right.
Yeah,
is my math correct that Bill won a 5th term? This is his 5th term?
That'll be his 5th term. It'll be 20 years at the end.
Wow.
There's only been, I think, a handful that have done 20 years.
Wow.
In Santa Barbara.
That's old school sheriff stuff. Nick, what was your takeaway?
Oh, it was interesting. Bill Brown running against Juan Camarena, a lieutenant with the department. He won by a larger margin this time than he did in the past couple of years. I was surprised. Again, I tried calling Juan Camarena on election night too, didn't hear back. But I'm told that he did not send mailers out to Democratic households. If that would be correct, that would be a very peculiar strategy.
That's very
we saw his signs up, typically next to Mike Stoker, a Republican, Christy Lozano, I'm not sure what she is, but very, very conservative, and the woman running for Congress with the red, white, and blue shoes on her yard signs that Quaid, and all very conservative.
Michelle Quaid.
So he sort of associated himself visually with pretty conservative group. It is interesting, when you think about the sheriff down south in Los Angeles County, Villanueva. Bill Brown is a very, very, very different creature than Villanueva, who went from being sort of the darling of the liberal left, looking for some kind of Democrat that could run for sheriff, and has really become kind of the
Trump
petty despot, beat up the media, beat up everybody, and
let the
everybody.
deputy sheriff's gangs go unremarked.
He is got a real race on his hand. It was very close. He's, it's going to be a runoff for November. And I bring up that race kind of is the yin and the yang of the statewide referendum that took place this week on criminal justice reform. And we're hearing a lot with Rick Caruso in LA, who is the front runner to become the mayor. He's in a runoff against Karen Bass, a congressman. And he is being touted as like it's crime and homelessness, and that's why he's so successful, which of course there's an element of truth to it, but 40 million bucks out of your own pocket doesn't hurt either. And then you have, what's his name? I can never get his name right.
Chesa Boudin.
Yeah, Boudin, the district attorney up in San Francisco, who was recalled for being terminally woke and completely, not interested in being a prosecutor. He got hauled out of there. The flip side is we got Villanueva down south, who is sort of the unapologetic beast of old school law enforcement, having a fight on his hands. And then you have Bonta and Padilla, Bonta running for state attorney general, Padilla for Senate, and
He's totally.
Gavin Newsom, all sort of moderate, hold down the middle side, but are very in favor of criminal justice reform. So I think it really is a way how you position yourself.
And Alameda County elected a very progressive reformer, Pamela Price, as did Contra Costa County. So yeah, the hot take nationally was, oh, even the liberal cities are voting, against this. And it's much more nuanced than that. I was on KYT and they did get Christie on election night and kept running the same quote over. And I have to say it sounded very much like she is thinking about running for the school board.
Did you get a copy of the phone message that was left? It was a voicemail ad, vote for Christie, but it was basically warning parents and voters that the school district is trying to convert their sons into daughters and their daughters into sons, and this whole sort of boogeyman of transgenderism against parental choice. It was a pretty, to call it a Hail Mary would be
no, I didn't hear that. Was that in her voice or did
it wasn't in her voice, but the punchline at the end of the ad was vote for Christie Lozano.
All right. Well, you got to get out. The other highlight, I think, was Mike Stoker's day after email, which you need higher calculus to understand his interpretation of why he was really the big winner on election night and how it's only a matter of time before he stomps Greg Hart in the assembly race. So we'll see how that one goes out. Josh, speaking of the school board and Christie Lozano's beefs were mostly with the Santa Barbara Unified School District and its board. So the board, under their signatures, issued this letter to all of the employees, all the teachers and all the employees, basically apologizing for, quote, a breakdown in communication and trust, which is pretty strong statement. And sort of saying that, yes, they're going to implement some of the things that the teachers groups have asked for. What did you hear from your sources after that came out? Is that going to settle things down? And is everyone watching my exclusive 13-hour interview with Hilda Maldonado, the superintendent?
It's in the queue for me. It's on my list, and I should be getting to it probably over Thanksgiving break when my schedule slows down. I think that the teachers were pleased that there was some acknowledgement finally from the board. Something, it unfortunately took them protesting and turning it up, going to other media and making a huge deal out of it. But I think that they were ultimately disappointed that it didn't really hold Hilda Maldonado accountable and instead just sort of took this passive voice posture of, there are problems and we're sorry about the problems and we have communication issues and we're going to get better. These teachers are tired of hearing that. They're tired. these teachers are tired of hearing that there's a pandemic, and these teachers, quite frankly, are tired of hearing the narrative that she's a Latina who has difficulty working with others, because that's not the issue from their perspective. So I think that it was sort of like, well, at least it's something, but we're still upset, we're still mad, and it's all going to come to a head again with the close seating issue, which is coming up in a meeting, I think next week or coming up soon. And the districts has this incredible idea of calling it leveling up, which is a really bad term, and it's just shows how out to lunch they are on how they're looking at this in terms of how they deliver education, and whether people should be in honors classes or college prep. And you have to approach looking at the paradigm of education and reimagining it. You have to look at it from a perspective other than leveling up. I know it's a catchy video game phrase, but when you're saying one group needs to be brought up to the other group, you're saying that the other group is the preferred, standard, dominant group, instead of saying we need to figure out a way to deliver education in such a way that everyone is equal and everyone benefits and has the same opportunity to learn. So that's going to come up, and that's going to be a big issue. So Hilda's getting a little bit of a break because just school's out, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going away.
And, for what it's worth, she did say, she whiffed on, kind of understanding, what the dynamic was and the exhaustion level. She herself looked exhausted when I talked to her. And in terms of the leveling up, universal access, whatever you want to call it, she also admitted that they screwed up the rollout on that. And, I get it mixed up, but I think the honors parents are worried that it's going to be dumbed down. And then the college prep families are more worried that they're not going to get the resources needed. And she said, oh no, that's all going to be fine. So we'll see what happens. But Ryan, you're a big sports guy. Let me ask you this. If you hire a manager or a football coach for 3 years, do you fire them after 2 years because they haven't done what you wanted them to do?
I mean, I guess it depends on where you're at, but if they're not on the up and up and it's not looking like it's going to be something good, and if they're starting to lose their staff, I think that's where the decision is being made. And once it gets too far where it's hard to bring, turn it around and get everybody back on your side, I think it might be too far.
Yeah. Nick, I know you agree with me that if you hire a manager for 3 years, you got to give them at least 3 years to see if the program.
It's too expensive.
Huh?
It's too expensive, and then you buy out their contract.
All right. I refuse to argue with Josh this week about this because I've been reprimanded.
I have no
by a
fire to
former-
argue anymore after listening to Nick's analysis of the LA mayor's race, so I'm good.
All right. Let's talk about the Community Formation Commission. This group that was brought together in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests to implement or to draft really a program for civilian review of the police department. And there was a kind of a shocking thing. It was shocking to me anyway, Ryan, the way that it was rolled out, because the city administrator, Rebecca Bjork, said, okay, we got this all worked out. I'm in charge of it. Or
Yeah.
Really her assistant is. And there really didn't seem to be much of the framework that the commission came up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think Josh kind of explained it really well. I encourage people to go watch kind of his short breakdown of a little bit, but they'd done this work for over 13 months, and they'd put together this cast of characters that are all from every corner of the populations that aren't really, get to have a voice in these conversations usually. And it looked like it was a good community thing. And they had been working with Barney, with Chief Barney, and then Gabe Escobedo, of course, was the chair of this. So it seems like they had been working back and forth. And of course, they don't agree on everything, but it seemed like the whole time they were working towards something, and it seemed like this idea was an independent civilian oversight board. And once the Community Formation Commission actually drafted their final recommendation, that was kind of what they wanted an 11-member board separate from the police department as it is now. And what kind of happened is when we got to the city council meeting and the final, proposal of how it would be implemented, it wasn't really that. It was kind of folded into the Fire and Police Commission now, which, they would expand it from 5 to 7 people, but it wasn't what they had asked. There was a couple things in there that, that maybe they weren't going to get. But I mean, I was kind of confused when I was watching the meeting. I was like, whoa, so the way they presented it was like, oh, it's easier. We can just fold it into the fire and police. They already do these things. We'll just have them in charge of it. We'll have the city administrator in charge of the hiring, firing.
Which they could have done a year ago. I mean, Nick, Gabe Escobedo seemed kind of blindsided by this, and I guess there was some friction between him and Barney Malecki.
Yeah, so he definitely spoke up, and I think rightfully so. It wasn't what he thought, and he's the chair of that group, and he was kind of speaking for some of the members too, and he was very passionate about, that wasn't what they had asked for. This is oversight in name only. And then he was followed by a lot of public commenters, not only from the Formation Commission, but from the community. And they were kind of echoing that and, really trying to not attack, but they were saying some things about Chief Barney and about the city and the police department. And, it was a contentious meeting, but afterwards was, I guess, Barney and Gabe had an interaction, and Barney had said Gabe had implied that he had been a liar or lied to 3 people, and there was a back and forth, and so we got a couple tips, and everybody had a different kind of description of it, and that was kind of a mess to wade through that. But it was unfortunate, and I hope that they can work it out, because they have to still draft this ordinance, and this is not done yet, and it might not be what they asked for, but Gabe knows that this is kind of what they have for the moment, and you have to work with it.
Yeah.
And
so they get one position, but it's going to stay under the administrator. Nick, can you talk about Chief Barney Maleckian's role in this, because he was doing everything he could, I think, to try to find a consensus, or at least some agreement.
Barney Maleckian has been actively engaged in this process for a long time. He's been working, attending the meetings, he's been speaking, and he made it very clear even before April, here's what I can live with and here's what I can't live with. And he made it very clear that I support a police oversight, but I do not support this proposal. He claims that 20 of the 22 ingredients that they asked for are included in this one. But again, it's sort of like they asked for a filet mignon and they got a hamburger, or whatever analogy you want to use. They didn't get what they asked for. Instead of getting their own commission, they got a hand-me-down commission. So they're going to be folded into the Fire and Police Commission, which traditionally has done dance permits and towing permits, and it's not a really, big flex commission. But what they're saying is we're going to fix that. We're going to have a meet 2 times a month. We're going to have a meet in the city council chambers. We're going to have it televised. We're going to expand the membership from 5 to 7. We're going to make sure that the members reflects a lot more of the diversity of the community that the Formation Commission absolutely did.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is like, there was a lot of heat on that one. And again, as somebody who has watched a lot of city council meetings where, you have the police chief come in and give a report and nobody asks them anything of a sort of an oversight nature for, I can't tell you how many years. I guess I'm struck not so much by what they didn't get, so that I understand if I was on that committee, I might have my nose out of joint. But what I'm struck by is we have something that we have never had before. It may be a cheapo production, but there will be a vehicle by which members of the community can take their complaints that they don't have right now.
Josh, the council member Megan Harmon, the chief mischief maker at City Hall, according to your reporting, came up with this compromise, I guess, or proposed compromise. She was kind of the chief advocate, you know, trying to lead this parade for an independent commission. Just talk about, are they getting what they wanted in terms of the council?
Yeah, I think that the council is getting what they wanted. And I think Megan Harmon did a good job of brokering a deal, and it really should have never gotten that far. I think we saw some deficiencies in City Administrator Rebecca Bjork, because what Megan Harmon did was really the role of what a city administrator should be doing. When things get confused and things get messy, the city administrator should come on and say, let me talk to you about what I'm hearing all of you agree on, and let's go there, and then let's talk about what we disagree on and see if we can find some middle ground. So Harmon just sort of did it. Yes, the city's getting what they wanted, because if you think about it, we're not going to have an outside civilian review board. Then the council had never, I mean, the city attorney, the city administrator, they never even called it a board. They called it a system. And so the city's getting what they wanted in that Chief Malekian, Rebecca Bjork, and Barbara Anderson somehow figured out a way to take the work of the commission, and specifically Gabe Escobedo, and take all of those recommendations and put them under the umbrella of the city management. And that is a problem. That is something that they have made a really bad mistake on. And it's unfortunate because it's going to tarnish Barty Malekian as he's about to retire. As Nick says, he's an incredible police chief and he's a good man. That being said, this is something that's going to tarnish his last sort of time at City Hall. These people, when they throw around the term white supremacy, I know that term is offensive and I know it's hard for people to hear. Okay, so don't call it that. Call it whatever you want. Okay, call it whatever. If you can hear it differently, then hear it this way. What they did was a board full of Latinos, African Americans, people of color, met for 13 months. And not only did they just meet, they were empowered by the city to meet and to come up with recommendations. They came up with these recommendations. Everybody was kind of happy a month ago on them. And then they walk into this meeting. By the way, I'd like to note this was a special Monday, 1:30 p.m. council meeting on a day that is not a typical day for them to meet. They walk into this meeting, they saw the staff report a few days ahead of time that says, we're going to take your recommendations and we're going to put them under an existing police and fire commission. We are going to have Barbara Anderson, who was literally just hired a month ago to be in this role.
She's Rebecca Bjork's deputy, basically. Huh?
Senior assistant to the city administrator, whose previous experience was working with homelessness. And we're going to have her be the outside sort of auditor. Call that term whatever you want, okay? But to people of color, that means you just took our hard work and you stole it from us and you put it in the hands of people who have power, people who are from the dominant culture. Now, dominant meaning City Hall, right? All white leaders, by the way, who are doing that. I don't want to make this a race thing. I'm trying to explain it so that people can understand how people feel.
And it's important context to put it in also, because when you see something that's supposed to be an independent audit and it's the city administrator's office, that doesn't seem independent. Technically, it's independent from the police department, and technically they checked off all these boxes, but it's one of those things that feels wrong when you kind of hear about it, like it's going to be under the umbrella of fire and police. And I think that is what Josh is explaining kind of really well, that this population is also, you know, they were very hopeful and working and with the city, and we were finally getting our voices heard, and to have that kind of at the last second Charlie Brown get the football taken away. That's going to cause some trust issues in this community.
Nick,
And yeah.
Nick, what about the mayor's argument, Randy Rouse's argument that this is a solution in search of a problem, that there's a very, very small number of incidents that would be, come to notice of an independent review?
Well, I think that was one of the things that, when you look at the numbers that the city of Santa Barbara Police Department has in terms of use of force, of complaints, they're very low, relatively speaking. And, there was not a documented problem. The argument was made by, the advocates who were on the Formation Commission and also Barney Malekian, is that that's now, law enforcement is changing. There needs to be some level of oversight so it stays that way. And so Randy's position, while statistically correct, is politically irrelevant, I would say. And I think most of the members of the council saw it that way. The real question was, when the Formation Commission went through many, many iterations here in terms of what they were proposing. And along the way, they alienated a lot of support along City Hall because of certain exclusionary ideas they had regarding to who could be a member and who couldn't, particularly if you had any law enforcement background. Ultimately, things got much more practical, but at first it seemed very ideological and exclusionary. The other issue was money. And I think
that's true.
with the city in the midst of a serious budget crisis, the complaint was made by a lot of people inside City Hall who were supportive of the Formation Commission that what they wanted was too expensive. I do believe that some of that was a little bit histrionic and a little exaggerated, but what they proposed at one point was having somebody there who was an executive level person with a salary of about $230,000 plus 2 staff people, which in the current context would be a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
right.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yeah, real quick, and
System-
just to explain the state of play, what happens next?
Okay, and just to Randy's point and the question you asked, Jerry, systems aren't in place for when things go well. Safety nets are not, that's not why they're there. They're there and they're in place for when things don't go well. And we don't want to be having the conversation a year from now, 2 years from now, about something terrible that happened and there was no civilian oversight. And the Kristen Sneddon, I think it was she who had a good point, was, if it doesn't mean you're doing a bad job, Jerry, we had to turn our stories into an editor. It doesn't mean, Ryan, Nick, like somebody has to edit our work. It doesn't mean we're lousy journalists. Like, we need support, we need oversight, we need somebody. And it's the same concept, is we need to be able to, if we're doing our work well, hold it up to scrutiny. The point here, though, is not pro-con civilian review board. It's that this commission walked into the meeting and was blindsided. It was
I just want to say, wait a minute. I mean, I don't believe that. And I've talked with Barbara Anderson, I've talked with Malek, I've talked to Michael Jordan. I haven't yet had a chance to have the conversation with Gabe, but on April 22nd, they said, Barney, Gabe, you go into a room, smoke a doobie and work it out. They have met either in person or by a phone or by email. There has been many communications between April 22nd and now with Gabe and with at least 4 other members of the commission. The commission itself does not exist as a formal entity anymore. And the idea was that it would be up to Gabe or whomever to pass it on to the other members. So this idea that everybody was blindsided, it may be that a lot of people were blindsided, but it wasn't because people hadn't been saying, Barbara Anderson hadn't been saying, by the way, this is where we're going. They were telling people where they were going for some time now. So if it was a blindside, it's not clear how that happened.
Well, I thought somebody reported, I can't remember whose story I read it in, that Gabe, said that Barney had lied to him about that. Is that?
No, it was Barney said that Gabe implied he had lied, and Gabe was not really sure what he was talking about in that moment, but I hope that what people are upset about is not the Gabe and Barney thing, is what ended up with this police commission and this oversight. And I think it is important to address, because a lot of the conversation, whether it be about what came to be, is about whether we need it or not. And whether we need it or not, we don't want to wait until it's so bad that we need it. And
Well,
we
nobody-
have a great police department. We should want to show beforehand.
We gotta move on this, but can somebody tell me what's next?
Well, the next thing they do is they have to go draft an ordinance.
June
And the
28th.
ordinance- So they have to figure out an ordinance for what the new commission looks like. They have to figure out at what point and who is at the table when they decide to hire an outside independent investigator, because they don't think that the local police are doing a sufficient job with the investigations that they're currently conducting.
So what's the timetable on when that
I
comes?
don't know.
June 28th, they're gonna come back with that ordinance.
June 28th?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's talk a little housing and State Street stuff. So the hotel moratorium, I was a little confused because I read a couple stories that they weren't necessarily contradictory, but the council voted 5-2 to do what, Josh? To impose a moratorium or to think about imposing a moratorium? What was the vote?
Go ahead, Ryan. You want to take it?
Yeah, so basically what they did, they're gonna go forward with it, but you give that 45 days and that allows them to give that notice so they can have that moratorium for up to 22 months. So it's kind of technical jargon, but they voted 5-2 that they're gonna do this ordinance, and once it comes back, it'll be ready, and in that 45 days, they'll vote on that.
But
So-
I understood Mike Jordan to be saying he didn't understand the nexus, or he wasn't sure there was a nexus between hotels and housing, whether putting a moratorium on hotels was going to in any way, generate more housing. But he voted for it anyway, John?
Well, initially, everybody except for Randy was sort of in support of this hotel moratorium, because we have this one project downtown where it's commercial office space, and then it's going to become a keyless hotel. And so initially I was like, well, we got to stop that. Well, then the staff presented some data that showed, well, actually, there aren't a whole lot of places that it would be likely, according to the staff, where these proposals are taking place outside of the AUD area, where people would actually be turning these units into housing. So Jordan pulled back and said, well, why are we going to do this if it's not really going to have a practical effect? In other words, if we're going to put this moratorium on, well, nobody's going to build housing in these areas anyway, because it's not practical. Now, within the AUD, where you incentivize with bonus density, it makes more sense for developers to build housing there. It could change between now and when it comes back. We could see some people changing some votes.
So they just vote against the ordinance.
Yeah, my understanding of the meeting was that they agreed to tell staff to go draft something, present it to us, and then when it comes back later in June, they're going to have another robust conversation about whether they're going to vote for a moratorium or not. What they did say is 21 projects that are in the pipeline are good. We're not going to mess with you now. It would
I think one of
anybody who has gotten a permit, or anybody who's had their permit signed off on, or what? Nick?
In the pipeline at all. So it's pre-application stage all the way through getting building permits, and they had a breakdown of exactly how many were in each category. I think the majority of them are closer to getting building permits. But I think there was also some pushback about, this is a largely symbolic kind of gesture, since it doesn't really have a huge effect on stuff that would be built where hotels are. But so some of the council members were saying that, are we singling out hotels when we could be doing other stuff too? But I think they wanted to let people know that they're taking housing seriously, and even if this isn't a huge thing, this is something they could do to that effect.
Nick, do you agree that this is mostly performative on their part rather than a way to actually get more housing? And are they not at risk of killing the golden goose if they continue down this pathway.
No, I don't think it's performative. I think that, they're sort of scrambling. And I think they're scrambling and desperate and kind of a good faith way. Like, it's like, Airbnb and, what you wrote about last week, about the Picasso and, the fractional ownership and all these things where you have a piece of land that could be housing or could have another use. And if developers are going for the other use instead of housing, they're trying to foreclose that option. And it's not a big capital letter, boom, 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 make a huge difference, but it will make a difference. It sends a signal. And if you're in the development community and you kind of go, okay, I'm getting a message. I'm going to be encouraged over here and discouraged over here. And I don't know how many units it's going to get, but it's going to prevent further leakage of
All right,
some small amount.
a couple of things really quick, be quick. The commercial vacancy tax, Josh, is that up or down? Where is that going to happen?
So they took this first step in approving the budget, and then it's got the city hall, and they're going to come back and talk about the budget again in 2 weeks. But part of that is for directing staff to create a commercial vacancy. They didn't use the word tax program that looks at how to stop these properties from being vacant for years. Some people making Harmon, others, let's do this. Let's force these property owners to rent it out, do something with this. A lot of the property owners are out of town, they don't care, they're waiting for big, somebody to come in there and pay them the full asking price. And I think Mayor Randy Rouse is opposed to this as just another thing that discourages people from wanting to be downtown. So we don't know what it's going to look like yet. It's a program that staff is going to present to them.
Ryan, isn't the mayor also against it because it's probably illegal and unconstitutional for the city to try to force these owners to do?
I'm not sure, but there's going to be a lot of back and forth about what the terms are going to be and how long would it have to be vacant before they would have to pay. And, there's going to be a lot of back and forth of what this looks like.
Is there something in the Constitution, Jerry, that says property owners can
Well,
hold their
yeah, I think
properties
that would
vacant?
be, I think you could make an argument that would be a taking.
No, it isn't. Other cities have them. They say you can keep it vacant, whatever, it's your property, do what you want with it. But if you do, it has a consequence on the city and we're going to ding you for it. And
Right.
other cities have them, and I don't know that they have been challenged successfully.
All right. Hey, Nick, now that Bill Brown is moving into his 20th year soon as sheriff, is he going to give you a concealed carry permit?
For my Derringer,
Yes. For your Derringer. Does this make my butt look fat? Yes.
if the Supreme Court rules the way that it looks like the Supreme Court's going to rule,
You won't need it.
Bill Brown will no longer have the up or down vote on whether or not I have a concealed weapons permit. We're pursuing mutually assured destruction, and that's the way it's going to go.
All right. Josh, you got a new little wrinkle on the podcast. Quickly tell us about that. And also your exclusive interview with our friend Wade Cooper.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So part of my brand expansion to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina on YouTube, and Ryan referenced it earlier today.
Plenty of free parking, yes.
Told me you'd pay me though, right?
What's that?
You told me you'd pay me for that though, right?
Yeah, I will buy you a coffee.
All right, let's
Cream
go.
and sugar coming up. No, so yeah, no, Jerry, I'm doing this podcast series with Jordy Armstrong, who's a geography professor at Santa Barbara City College. And turns out she happens to appreciate the music of Alanis Morissette, much like I do. And so we're doing some podcasts on our similarities. Very entertaining, Jerry.
I would say I would call that narrow casting.
I'll make you a deal. I'll watch Hilda's podcast with you and you watch this one. Okay. And we're going to be doing lots of stuff on parenting, and we're about the same places in life, and, talking about common issues.
Sounds fun.
So there's that. And then
and what about Wade?
Wade Cooper is hosting a Walla Festival Saturday, 4 p.m. And he and his partner are putting on this Walla Festival benefit for Sarah House. And so it's a first year of the event. They have some idea on how they like to celebrate their anniversary. And so they decided, hey, we're both board members for Sarah House. And so we want to figure out a way to raise money for this cause. And they've invited all these singers and bands, and I know Ryan will be there.
Sarah House is where people of the vintage of Nick and I go to check out. Is that
Go
correct?
find an iceberg, right?
All right, and then of course the biggest story of the week, was when most people were interested in, was the zebra chasing the guy. What was that? Have you ever been chased by a zebra on your bike, Nick?
You know, I'm gonna have to ride up Gibraltar now just to have the experience.
I always
that
thought
was a
zebras
great
were like,
story.
What was the zebra's name? Didn't we get his name? It was like
Maynard.
Maynard. There we go.
Yes.
Maynard.
I always thought zebras were like real gentle creatures. I mean, it's
Not
scary.
donkey zebras. Donkey
That
zebras
sounded
are next level.
scary. That's not, and Josh, you got all your reporting ripped off by the Sacramento Bee on this? With no credit?
Yeah, you know, I feel like the artist formerly known as Prince or something. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not getting compensated, and Sony Music's over here
Well,
just
Josh,
taking my music.
I think your article just perpetuated stereotypes about zebras, and really typecast them as aggressive, dangerous creatures. Again, you know, zebra phobia is rampant in this country, and you were just perpetuating it with your false narrative.
Well, call it whatever you want, Nick, but I'll no. So I did get hate mail. I got it mail from people saying, "Oh, you wrote this story. You made
he
this
had
it was
biker
spandex.
look
For an
helpless."
anti-zebra bias.
Yeah, and they said the zebra is an animal, and I don't think he was actually attacking this
And
person.
Josh, you don't get whiter than people in spandex, all right? You totally sided with the white narrative here against the zebra.
Nick, are you saying that he deserved chasing by a zebra?
Yeah, I'm just saying, you know, you take your chances when you ride your bike up the
You don't
hill.
want to jump to conclusions.
All
We
right.
have all the facts.
All right.
It's more nuanced.
We got to leave it there. Josh Molina, Ryan Cruz, and Nick Welsh, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers. Don't forget to get a vaccine and a booster if you've already had it.